Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of BTP. We're breaking the planes, scoring tutties, and attempting to provide quality content to all of the listeners. And man, free freaking agency. This week has been an absolute nut show as we expected. Kirk Cousins is resetting the market for quarterbacks, getting a fully guaranteed contract and screaming from the mountaintops. For all of you PUBG fans. But things are just going buck wild in the NFL, and we're here to break down by division some of these moves so far. And there are still plenty of free agents out there right now to be acquired that will really significantly impact these teams. First, let's start in the NFC East with my favorite team, the New York Football Giants, who released Brad Wing, Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie last week to open cap space up to potentially go after an offensive lineman. We all thought it was going to be Andrew Norwell. It was supposedly, quote-unquote, a done deal. Well, that was absolute bullcrap because Andrew Norwell goes to Jacksonville and Tom Coughlin kind of takes him away from the New York Giants. And he resets the guard market, as did Kelechi Osemele 2 years ago and Kevin Zeitler last year. But the Giants say we cannot go into this season with the offensive line in this kind of shape, with Chad Wheeler and Adam Bisnowaty and Eric Flowers as our tackles. So they go and get Nate Solder. They signed Nate Solder to a massive deal worth 4 years and $62 million. And I was sitting there thinking, how do the Giants even have this cap space? Because I think it's underrated. Or at least I don't hear a lot of Giant fans talking about how bad of a situation Dave Gettleman inherited from Jerry Reese. I mean, you just got to think about the draft picks. JPP is the only draft pick on this team that's signed to a second contract right now. He has missed time and time again. And yes, you can make excuses for Chad Jones, the safety out of LSU who lost part of his legs in a car accident, and David Wilson, the running back from Virginia Tech. You can make excuses for that, but you can't make excuses for just the annual missing of these mid-round picks that Jerry Reese did. It's inexcusable. And Dave Gettleman came into this situation with a locker room that was falling apart. You had the entire secondary turning on the coach. You had Landon Collins and Eli Apple in a feud. There was absolutely no leadership in this team. Cap space, done. Virtually no linebackers. They had to go out and get Alec Ogletree from the Rams. Check out my piece on how he's going to fit in the James Betcher's defense on Inside the Pylon right now. And absolutely no offensive line to speak of, with your two best offensive linemen, Justin Pugh and Weston Richburg, set to hit free agency. Looking like neither of them will be back. Richburg goes to the 49ers. Pugh has yet to be signed. Probably one of the best free agents left. And Gettleman inherits this, and I see Giant fans just absolutely bashing Dave Gettleman right now. And I personally do not understand it. The situation was terrible. They still believe Eli Manning has some years left, and these moves that they made are indicative of the fact that they are not in this rebuild mode. Does that mean they're not going to take a quarterback? That's yet to be seen. They could still take a quarterback with these moves. They can. But they bring in Jonathan Stewart. And the one thing I'll say about the Jonathan Stewart signing, I don't like the fact that it was 2 years, $6.9 million. I think you could have got it down more because I don't see a lot of suitors for Jonathan Stewart. But he brings leadership. Okay, he brings somewhat of a goal line presence. Yes, he's not the explosive athlete that he was. He's in his 30s. Understood. He didn't even average 4 yards per carry last year. Got it. Behind the hog mollies that Dave Gettleman put together in Carolina. But he brings leadership, something that this position group lacked since Rashad Jennings was cut a few years back. So it really makes sense from that aspect. There's no more Shane Vereen, no more Orleans Darkwa on the roster right now. All you have is Paul Perkins, Wayne Gallman, these young running backs. You bring in this veteran presence for stability, just like Dave Gettleman was looking for. Dave Gettleman wants people who are professional football players, not people who play football professionally. And Jonathan Stewart is a professional. Not to mention, obviously, he has a relationship with Dave Gettleman, has a relationship with offensive coordinator Mike Shula. So those are aspects of the acquisition that I like. I see a lot of people on Twitter bashing him. I don't necessarily understand it. Nate Solder, you bring him in, Eli Manning's comfort level just skyrocketed, and you help solidify the weakest point of this team, which was the tackle position. You can bump Flowers over potentially to play right tackle or maybe even kick him inside. Probably not going to pick up his fifth-year option now, which I believe we have until May, or the Giants have until May, to pick that up. So now you have Nate Solder, who has been playing with the Patriots. And yes, He is the highest paid tackle now in the National Football League with 4 years, $62 million. Is he the best tackle in the league? No, but that's how the market is set. And the Giants needed to address this position. When you're going into the draft with 5 picks currently, and we could talk about that for days. Will the Giants trade down? What are they going to do? Are they going to go after Quentin Nelson and really revamp this offensive line? It's a great discussion, but you needed to get a tackle. Even if you drafted the top tackle coming out in this class, whether you believe it's Connor Williams or Orlando Brown after his terrible workout at the Combine, whomever, Chukwuma or Okorafor, he wouldn't have been able to step in and be the blindside protector of Eli Manning in his waning years. So you go out and you get Nate Solder and you attack it. I do appreciate that. It's aggressive. The only time we saw Jerry Reese really be aggressive was when he traded up to get Landon Collins and when his job was really, really on the line and he spent over $200 million to revamp a defense that was historically bad. And I wrote about that too at Inside the Pylon. Go and check those articles out. But yes, the New York Giants also get Kareem Martin. I wrote about him coming to the Giants at Inside the Pylon as well. 3 years, $21 million. He was a third-round pick by the Cardinals, one of those hybrid defensive linemen / linebackers. He's actually the person who strip-sacked Eli Manning in the Week 16 game on Christmas Eve when the Giants went to Glendale and did not experience a good time. Didn't even score any points, actually. So Kareem Martin, that's a versatile piece who obviously knows James Bettcher. Moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champs, they go and they acquire Michael Bennett in the trade. And that is kind of a crazy acquisition when you think about the talent of Michael Bennett. And the rich get richer. Obviously, this puts Vinny Curry in a very precarious state, but they're not done revamping that crazy defensive line that they have. They bring in Haloti Ngata on a 1-year, $3 million deal. And yes, Haloti Ngata is old. He can play a situational role right now and thrive in said situational role. The rich just tend to get richer. Just like I said, they release Brent Selleck. They trade Torrey Smith to Carolina. So now Cam Newton can get Torrey Smith. And they acquire Darryl Worley, cornerback that they were interested in that draft. Now the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be contenders in the NFC East, in the NFL, and in the NFC for quite some time now. So the Giant fans, everybody else in the NFC East, get used to it. Carson Wentz is not going anywhere. Doug Peterson, fantastic coach, is not going anywhere. Are they going to trade Nick Foles? Who knows? But they can get high value for him right now. So that team is incredibly interesting with everything that they're doing. And they have something figured out. Joseph Ferriola wrote about Howie Roseman and Bill Belichick and these teams that have had success, and how they take advantage of the inefficiencies of the trade market. That article's out Inside the Pylon if you haven't caught the trend that's going on here. But another huge signing was keeping the linebacker core, specifically Nigel Bradham, intact. 5-year contract to Nigel Bradham. A lot of people thought he was going to leave, but he signs 5 years, $40 million to Jim Schwartz's defense, who's still going to be there. So you got to tip your cap to someone who is doing fantastic work in Howie Roseman, especially when you think about the fact that he took a back seat to Chip Kelly. He took a back seat, and a lot of people weren't exactly sure what his role was. The Chip Kelly experiment was a colossal failure. He comes in, totally revamps his team, gets his player in Carson Wentz. 2 years later, they're winning the Super Bowl. So, Howie Roseman, you absolutely killed it. I don't even know what to say. Just good for you, my man. You get a winner chicken dinner too. PUBG that. As for the Dallas Cowboys, haven't done much. They're being linked to Ndamukong Suh. I'm not 100% sure if that will happen. They are not a team that's in great cap situation. I know they're trying to restructure with Zach Martin, extend him a little bit more. They designated DeMarcus Lawrence as their franchise tagged player. You need to keep him off that really hot season that he had after a couple down seasons with suspensions and back injuries and all these really concerning things. DeMarcus Lawrence gets retained. So that's something that is good for the Dallas Cowboys. They're just hoping to be more healthy this year, hoping that their younger players step up and play to their abilities, and hoping that Zeke does not get suspended, because that's another big reason on why they struggled. And we move on to the Washington Redskins. We remember the Alex Smith trade. They traded Kendall Fuller at a third-round pick to Kansas City for Alex Smith, a guy they were going to cut anyways, somewhat fleeced in that trade because Kendall Fuller is very highly regarded around the league, especially for his ability to cover in the slot. They go out and they re-sign Mason Foster. They re-sign Brian Quick, Dustin Hopkins, the kicker, for what that is worth. And then they bring in Paul Richardson after Ryan Grant goes to Baltimore, but that contract was voided, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But they bring in Paul Richardson, who really was injured a lot in Seattle, and then in the playoffs 2 years ago, he really showed up big time, and he started making his name for himself this year as well, with Tyler Lockett still there. So he goes out and he gets himself a very nice payday. 5 years, $40 million. If you're a player, you're in love with that. They also re-signed Zach Brown to a 3-year, $24 million deal. Not exactly top 3 linebacker payment like he was looking for, but it's good for Washington to retain him, especially after losing Trent Murphy, who they didn't have at all last year anyways because of the injuries. But moving on to the NFC North, and we have to start with the Chicago Bears, who are making a splash in free agency and bringing weapons to Mitchell Trubisky. I got to applaud Ryan Pace when it comes to this. He, first, on the defensive side, brings back Sam Acho, 2 years, $7.5 million, re-signs Prince Amukamara, who I feel like is slightly underrated. I feel like that entire secondary last year was slightly underrated in general. 3 years, $27 million deal for Prince. And then on the offense, he realizes he needs to go out and get weapons for his young quarterback, Mitchell Trubisky, who they traded up in last year's draft to get. First, love this deal. Goes out, gets Allen Robinson. 3 years, $42 million. Allen Robinson is a high-quality receiver coming off of a torn ACL. He suffered it literally in the first quarter of the first game of the season. So he's more than likely going to be fully ready for training camp. We know the skill set of Allen Robinson. Then he overpays a bit for Taylor Gabriel, 4 years, $26 million, but he wants to nail down that slot receiver. And he also brings in Trey Burton, 4 years, $32 million, another player who can play in the slot, a move tight end. Pair him with Adam Shaheen, who they drafted last year, coming out of a small school, raw, big, 280-pound tight end who can move. But Trey Burton is going to be a mismatch nightmare in Matt Nagy's offense, just like he was in Doug Peterson's offense. Connection there. They also bring in Aaron Lynch, an edge player from the 49ers. So I really like what the Chicago Bears were able to do and kind of replenish the dearth of talent that was on their roster. So let's move on to the Green Bay Packers, who cut Jordy Nelson. That's a shame. He's been there his entire career. He goes and he finds another home. But then they bring in Jimmy Graham, 3 years, $30 million deal. He never really meshed well up in Seattle, but we remember the Jimmy Graham that worked with Drew Brees. Can Mike McCarthy kind of ignite that Jimmy Graham with Aaron Rodgers, who we've seen Aaron Rodgers have so much success with wide receivers. But now you have a big-bodied tight end, a true red zone threat in Jimmy Graham. No more Jordy Nelson. This could be a really interesting pairing. 3 years, $30 million. Then they bring in Muhammad Wilkerson on a 1 year, $5 million deal. And you got to look at their front line right now on defense with Mike Daniels and boys. They have a dangerous, big, talented defensive front who can shut the run down. But can they secure the back end of their defense? And that has kind of been the problem. We know they traded Demarius Randall in the trade to Cleveland that brought in DeShone Kizer to be the backup for Aaron Rodgers after the Brett Hundley experience did not work. But other than the Jimmy Graham, Muhammad Wilkerson signings, nothing too much to boast about for the Green Bay Packers. But then we move on to the Detroit Lions, who have been looking for a running game since basically Barry Sanders, it seems like. The Detroit Lions go out and they release Eric Ebron. So he is still on the market right now. Young player, a bust by all accounts when you consider the fact that Odell Beckham Jr., Aaron Donald, and Zach Martin were drafted after him, and Taylor Lewan. So that's something really big you got to live up to for Eric Ebron, and he just never did with the Detroit Lions. But they agreed to a 3-year contract with Devon Kennard, and I know Devon Kennard all that well because he was here with the New York Giants, somebody who was injured quite often. He signs a 3-year, $18.75 million deal Bring in Nevin Lawson, signed Deshaun Shedd to a 1-year, $3.5 million deal coming off the injury with Seattle, coming from that quote-unquote Legion of Boom that has been absolutely blown up. And they also re-sign Zach Zenner. And the Detroit Lions are going to be looking to win this division like they always will. It's going to be hard with the Vikings, with the Bears kind of getting up. I feel like they have the guy in place right now with Matt Nagy, and then you have the Packers and Aaron Rodgers not going away. But the Lions will be right there with Matt Patricia and company, new regime that is there. And now we have the Minnesota Vikings. Let's sit here and just wonder about the fact that Kirk Cousins, a quarterback who's in his prime, who is an above-average quarterback in the National Football League, was able to secure a fully guaranteed contract. That is going to set the market for every single quarterback, and maybe in the coming years, other positions, which is huge in the National Football League, a sport with the kind of vicious contact that happens play in and play out. The Vikings needed their guy. They went 13-3 last year with Case Keenum, and Case Keenum goes to Denver. He played very well last year. It wasn't just a schematic thing. He did play well. But this is an upgrade to Kirk Cousins. What a massive contract. And then they go and they trade a 2019 fifth-round pick to acquire Trevor Siemian to be the backup. Just to think, last year the Vikings had 3 starting caliber quarterbacks. And obviously you had Teddy coming off of a devastating injury. You had Sam Bradford coming off of an injury that he suffered early on in the season. And you had Case Keenum. Now, neither of them will be on the Vikings, and they bring in somebody who started last year in Trevor Siemian, and then Kirk Cousins on this massive deal. And we have to also put this into perspective. It's only a 3-year contract. So Kirk Cousins is going to still be young when that 3-year contract is up if this does not work out in Minnesota's favor. But looking at Minnesota's depth chart, you just kind of have to marvel at how good that defense is right now with Danielle Hunter, Linval Joseph, Everson Griffin, Anthony Barr, Eric Kendricks, Andrew Sendejo, Harrison Smith, Xavier Rhodes, Trey Waynes. Last year they drafted Ben Gideon. Oh, you can hear the train in the background. That is the Wayne train, the Wayne Gallman train. You can thank Andrew Jordan for that nickname. But the Vikings are real contenders here, and the NFC North is going to be something that we will follow closely throughout this season because the Green Bay Packers, the Bears on the up and up, the Lions with a new coaching staff still have Matt Stafford. A lot of good quality teams there. We know really at this point, the Bears maybe not so much, but any of those teams can make the playoffs. And it's very intriguing to kind of prognosticate upon. Let's move on to the NFC South, where we have the New Orleans Saints, where they lock Drew Brees up. They signed Tom Savage, so they got the quarterback situation pretty locked down. Bring back Alex Okafor on a 2-year, $10 million deal, and sign Demario Davis to a 3-year, $24 million deal from the New York Jets. Will fit that defensive scheme. They also bring back Patrick Robinson, which is kind of a little homecoming, if you will. Patrick Robinson was drafted in the first round of 2010 and by all accounts busted, quote-unquote, there. And then he bounced around the league, went to Indy, and he ended up in Philadelphia this year where he thrived and really was pivotal on that defense, a Super Bowl winning defense at that. So Patrick Robinson goes back to New Orleans, which is good for all the Saints fans. I'm sure they're happy about getting him back, especially if he does live up to the way he played this past season. And then we have the Carolina Panthers shoring up that defensive line after Star Lotulelei goes up to Buffalo. Bring in Dontari Poe on a 3-year, $27 million deal. Steal him from the Atlanta Falcons. He's just a space eater, also very athletic for someone of his monstrous size. Can really pair well with Kawan Short and that strong defensive front that they have in Carolina. They also got aggressive. Marty Hurney now in charge. Trade Daryl Worley, who had pretty good marks by PFF and by all accounts is a solid cornerback to the Philadelphia Eagles for Torrey Smith, somebody that they were going to cut anyway. So another good job on Howie Roseman to get value for somebody they were more than likely going to part ways with. Carolina also wanted to bring in somebody to pair with James Bradbury. They get a 26-year-old long-armed cornerback that Giants fans and NFC East fans know very well, Bashaud Breeland. 3 years, $24 million deal for the Carolina Panthers to lock him down to join up on Eric Washington's defense, because we know Steve Wilks has moved on. It's like defensive coordinators just keep getting head coaching jobs from the Carolina Panthers. They wanted to shore up that defense, and they were able to do that by acquiring Bashaud Breeland. The Panthers also released a couple veterans, Jonathan Stewart, who signed with the Giants, Charles Johnson, and safety Kurt Coleman. And then we have the Falcons, who by all accounts have not been active at all. They re-signed Liam McFadden. They re-signed Matt Bryant, their kicker, but they're also one of the bottom 6 teams in cap space at the moment, so they're not being all that active. I think they're already in position to make a run in the playoffs with the team that they have in place, the speed that Dan Quinn has kind of put together on that defense, along with Matt Ryan's progression. Hopefully Steve Sarkisian can kind of maximize what Julio Jones, Matt Ryan can do. Then let's move on to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, another team that really has not been active whatsoever. They re-signed Ryan Fitzpatrick, and they re-signed Brent Grimes to a 1-year deal. Keith Tandy. They bring in kicker Chandler Cannizzaro from the Jets on a 3-year deal. Hopefully this kicker can last in Tampa, because it seems like kickers go to Tampa Bay to die because it's impossible to kick on that grass out there. They bring in Bo Allen on a 3-year, $15 million deal. I think that's somebody that they can use in sub packages. Also someone who could potentially start right next to Gerald McCoy. They really need a lot of help in the trenches and in the secondary. At cornerback, both their cornerbacks are undersized cornerbacks. Brent Grimes, being older, plays with excellent technique. Vernon Hargreaves has not put it together quite yet. And then you have the trenches. Both of them really need to be bolstered. I have been assigned the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the NFL Daily Mock Draft, so every day I do a daily mock draft for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Always stress the trenches on the offense and defense, the secondary, running back as well, because Doug Martin has been released. They did sign Mike Evans to an extension. They did sign Cameron Brate to an extension. So they have been active when it comes to locking up some of their talent long term, but I'm sure Buck fans really wanted to see them go out, try to get somebody like Tremaine Johnson or land one of those big free agents to try to help the deficiencies that this team has. It just never came to fruition. Let's move on to the Arizona Cardinals, who are in a really crappy situation. Now, they're in a really crappy situation because you have Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan in your division. The Seahawks, they basically blew their entire secondary and team up, especially on the defensive side of the ball, so they're not too much to worry about. But Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan are going to be around for a while. And I don't know if you've realized what the Rams have been doing, but they are absolutely killing it when it comes to assembling a team. Then you have the great mind of Kyle Shanahan. And what is he going to do with Jerick McKinnon? We'll get into that in a little bit. But the Cardinals are in this division with a porous offensive line, a defense that is pretty solid but has just lost its defensive coordinator in James Bettcher to the New York Football Giants. Yeah, Mike McCoy, who has been traditionally pretty good with quarterbacks, helped revamp Phillip Rivers' career a few years back. So you bring in Sam Bradford on a 1-year, $20 million deal, and Mike Glennon on a 2-year, $4 million deal. Obviously, Mike Glennon's insurance policy to Sam Bradford, because Sam Bradford has degenerative knees. But if you put Sam Bradford behind this offensive line, even if they go out and sign Justin Pugh, who's probably the best offensive lineman left, he's going to get eaten alive. This team is not good enough to protect somebody who's immobile and who has incredibly bad knees, and it's very unfortunate that Sam Bradford has this case of just issue after issue after issue. But it's reality, too. And in this division, that's just young coaches in an NFC that is really, really difficult. I feel bad for Steve Wilks. I feel like he's walked into a situation that's kind of hard to bounce back from. They're top 15 in cap room right now, which is a good thing, obviously. It's positive. They're sitting at pick 15 in the draft. And then you know they want a signal caller. Who have they fallen in love with? That's really the question. But there's so much more this team needs, too, especially on the offensive line. The Cardinals just have not put it together yet. You go out. You release Tyrann Mathieu because you wouldn't take a pay cut. You bring in Andre Smith to try to help bolster the offensive line. But we know that's not something that's going to fix everything. So Sam Bradford, best of luck back there, my man. Moving on to the Seattle Seahawks, been relatively quiet outside of the trades. But in free agency, they bring in Barkevious Mingo on a 2-year, $6.8 million deal. Safety Bradley McDougal, they re-signed to a 3-year, $13.5 million deal. But that's not the story when we're talking about the Seattle Seahawks. The story is them trading Michael Bennett and a 2018 7th-round pick to Philly for Marcus Johnson and a 2018 5th-round pick. Releasing Richard Sherman, releasing Jeremy Lane, releasing Deshaun Shedd. That whole Legion of Boom. What's happening with them? Is Earl Thomas going to get traded? Cam Chancellor, is he ever going to play again? Cliff Averill, is he ever going to play again? It's kind of scary when you think about it. He signed tight end Ed Dixon to a 3-year contract. So I'm sure Seattle fans are very, very nervous right now, especially when you think about everything the Rams are doing, everything that the 49ers are doing. The 49ers, just start with them. Jimmy Garoppolo resigns that 5-year contract extension. He's going to be around for the long haul. Then they go out and they sign Richard Sherman to a 3-year deal. Basically saying, all right, you don't want Richard Sherman, we're going to bring him in. And now you have a secondary. Well, you know Richard Sherman, if he needed any more motivation to play, you just gave it to him. He's coming off of a bad Achilles injury, but now you have a secondary with very, very long corners, which fits what Robert Saleh wants to do down there. With Richard Sherman, with Ahkello Witherspoon, who they drafted last year. That defense is still young. They have picks like Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner, Solomon Thomas, Eli Harold, Reuben Foster, still playing. The 49ers are not going anywhere whatsoever. And that sucks for the Seahawks. Seahawks run, but hey, that's just the cycle of the NFL. The 49ers signed center Weston Richburg, 5 years, $47.5 million, then subsequently traded Daniel Kilgore after giving him a 3-year extension. So that's something that was unfortunate for Kilgore, but that's just the nature of the beast. He goes to Miami after Miami cuts Mike Pouncey. The 49ers also signed Jerick McKinnon, which now we get to think about what Kyle Shanahan's going to do with Jerick McKinnon. Signed him to a 4-year, $30 million deal, which is a lot of money for a running back. And we've seen what Shanahan has done with running backs like Devonta Freeman, running backs like Tevin Coleman. He uses them in the passing game, takes advantage of man coverage. Jerick McKinnon's ability to defeat linebackers in man coverage is going to be exploited, and the 49ers are going to have a lot of fun with him on the offensive side of the football. They also signed outside linebacker Jeremiah Atachu from the Chargers and re-signed Marquise Goodwin. Let's move on, though, to the Rams. And the Rams have had a busy offseason, just to say the least. They trade Alec Ogletree to the Giants. They trade Robert Quinn to Miami. So we know that they're just incredibly active in the trade market, maybe picking a thing or two up from the Eagles and the Patriots, teams who have had a lot of success. They go out, they trade for Marcus Peters. They trade for Aqib Talib. They designate LaMarcus Joyner their franchise tag player, who plays a pivotal role, kind of like that Chris Harris role for Wade Phillips' defense. So it's crazy. They traded a 5th-round pick for Aqib Talib, a 2nd-round pick, and a 4th-round pick for Marcus Peters, and get a 6th-round pick in exchange. And then for Robert Quinn, they get a 4th and a 6th. And they also trade a 6th. Kind of just revamping their team, moving money away like they did with Alec Ogletree, and bringing in talent after talent. So now they're secondary. They lose Tremaine Johnson, but they get Marcus Peters. They get Aqib Talib, somebody who has a lot of experience in Wade Phillips' defense. Have they just revamped their team? And they also signed Nickel Roby-Coleman to a 3-year, $15.75 million deal. The Rams are young, fun, and a team to be reckoned with in the NFC. So let's move on to the AFC and start with the New York Football Jets. Yeah, just deemed that nickname for them. So the Jets missed out on the Kirk Cousins sweepstakes, which I think a lot of people expected. So they re-signed Josh McCown to a 1-year, $10 million deal. I like this. He's good with young quarterbacks when it comes to mentoring. He is a true professional. More than likely could start this year. I mean, I expect him to go out and draft a quarterback. You got Teddy Bridgewater, and you don't know what to expect for him. Bring him in on a 1-year, $5 million deal. Now, can you reunite what Teddy potentially has after that devastating injury? Potentially. But you have Josh McCown there as a security blanket and somebody who can help mentor the young guys that you did bring in. Now, Christian Hackenberg, that's not going to be a thing anymore. They also bring in Isaiah Crowell, 3-year, $12 million deal. Agree to a deal with Spencer Long, bring in Avery Williamson, who I feel like fits in well with what the Jets want to do on defense, coming from Dick LeBeau's 3-4 defense. He was starting Mike linebacker, good at the point of attack, strong base, solid play strength, good competitive toughness. Does a good job with his hands, stacking and shedding blocks, things of that nature. Could improve on his mental processing a bit. But the big get for the New York Jets was two things in my mind. One, bringing in Tremaine Johnson on $15 million per year. Yeah, that's a lot of money, but he was the top cornerback available. We know how important corners are in Todd Bowles' aggressive man type of defense. We saw that with Patrick Peterson. Tremaine Johnson is not Patrick Peterson, but he is a solid cornerback in the National Football League. You're also able to bring back Morris Claiborne on a 1-year, $7 million deal. Morris Claiborne, not spectacular, but somebody who, paired with Tremaine Johnson, makes a solid 1-2 at the corner position. And that's what the New York Jets have been up to. After releasing Mo Wilkerson, Matt Forte retires. They bring in Cairo Santos to kick field goals for them. Good for the New York Jets. Bringing in people. We know they had the cap space to do all of this. And they didn't even make splash signings. I mean, Tremaine Johnson's up there, but it wasn't anything crazy. They're still top 3 in cap space in the league. Only the Browns and the Colts have better cap space than them right now. So that's what the Jets have been up to. And then we have the Patriots, man. And the New England Patriots are interesting because a lot of people have left this team. A lot of people have moved on. Nate Solder goes to the Giants. Martellus Bennett, his option gets declined. He's not coming back. David Harris retires. So they get aggressive. They go out and they trade for Danny Shelton. Able to acquire him. That's a big defensive tackle who can replace Alan Branch, who got released. They trade for Jason McCourty, bring the twin back with his brother, Devin. Now there's 2 McCourtys roaming the secondary. So they do both those trades, separate trades with the Browns. They re-sign Rex Burkhead. And other than that, been relatively quiet. They lose Danny Amendola to a division rival, which, sure, doesn't sit too well with them, but hey, that's just the nature of the beast. When you're this good, you don't need to do as much. But is this, I know a lot of people are talking, is this the end of the Patriot dynasty? And I mean, we've been hearing this question since the Chiefs game, the epic Chiefs game on Monday night where we're on the Cincinnati was a big thing. And I'm not going to sit here and doubt the Patriots. They did lose a lot of pieces. They still have some guys who are contemplating retirement. A lot of injuries to players who are going to be coming back, like Julian Edelman. You have the whole Gronk situation. Tom just keeps getting older and older, but they're still the Patriots. And I know they lose Matt Patricia. They're able to retain McDaniels. How long will Bill Belichick be able to work with Robert Kraft and Tom Brady? And all these questions surround the media, and it's cool to just sit here and kind of talk about it, but I'm not going to be doubting New England. So let's move on to the Miami Dolphins, who were able to steal Danny Amendola on a 2-year, $12 million deal. And that's not the only receiver they brought in. They bring in Albert Wilson on a 3-year, $24 million deal, which is, I want to say, interesting, because both of those receivers are primarily slot receivers. You still have Devontae Parker and Kenny Stills, who are more outside guys. Leonte Carril has never amounted to anything, and then you trade Jarvis Landry to the Cleveland Browns for a 7th and a 4th round pick. And bringing Danny Amendola, you steal him from a rival. That's very smart on the Miami Dolphins' part. I'm guessing they're going to roll out a lot of, 4 wide sets, potentially something along those lines to play all of them. But Amendola and Wilson are both similar, I would say. I would say Wilson's much more explosive than Amendola, but they're both very smart receivers who tend to play inside in the slot. So they acquire those guys. They also go out, release Julius Thomas, release Ndamukong Suh from his massive contract, which is kind of big news, and he's still out there. They release Mike Pouncey. They signed Josh Sitton to a 2-year contract. And it's kind of funny to me, man. I don't ever want to say people getting released is funny, but Adam Gase to me has always seemed like that kind of guy who just does not put up with anybody's bull crap. We can go back to, I want to say it was 2 years ago, when he had a couple guards starting and they weren't playing up to par, and literally he cut them the next week after being starters. He's just like a no-nonsense guy, if I feel like, from an outsider looking in, when it comes to people who do not fit what he wants to do. They're potentially in the race to get a quarterback as well in this draft. You have Ryan Tannehill coming back from a devastating injury. Probably should restructure that contract. Bring in Robert Quinn. A lot of change here going on with this defense. A lot of change going on this team. They're about a year removed from going to the playoffs when they went to Pittsburgh, and we saw Matt Moore get absolutely leveled by Bud Dupree. The Miami Dolphins now got to start making moves here. Adam Gase got to start improving, and we'll see if they can. And another team that made the playoffs this past year that we're going to talk about is the Buffalo Bills, and the Buffalo Bills able to bolster their defensive front a little bit, which is something they desperately needed. The Bills bring in star Lotulelei to pair with Kyle Williams, who they re-signed. And then they go out and they trade Tyrod Taylor. They go out and they trade Tyrod Taylor to the Browns. A.J. McCarron, sign him 2 years, $10 million deal. Someone who can be a stopgap because they have 2 first-round picks, the 12th and the 22nd, and they're going to be aggressive. They're going to trade. They're going to trade up to either the Giants or the Colts or somebody and get the signal caller that they want. They also bring in Trent Murphy on a 3-year, $21 million deal from the Redskins. He is coming off of an injury. Raphael Bush, 2 years, $3.5 million. The Bills are just trying to make consecutive playoffs now, which is something that would be amazing for Bills Mafia. I mean, they haven't made the playoffs forever. They make the playoffs this year. Thank you, Andy Dalton. And in return, we're going to give you a left tackle. So here, you can take Cordy Glenn, give us your first-round picks. We'll swap a little bit, and all's well and good. So Cordy Glenn heads to Cincinnati. So the Bills are going to be active come draft. It's not a hot take whatsoever. I think everybody can see the writing on the wall when it comes to that. But we're going to move on from Buffalo and start talking about the Browns. Now, I'm going to bring a diehard Browns fan onto the podcast to talk about these trades and these moves and what John Dorsey is really doing here. So I'm not going to dive too far into the trades that have already happened, that I've already kind of touched upon because all the other teams have been involved. But Joe Thomas retiring is huge news. This guy has been a stalwart at left tackle for the Cleveland Browns since 2007. And he retires now. And it's one of those things, man, this guy's going to name in the rafters kind of player. So I just want to tip my cap to Joe Thomas because he's been absolutely amazing. They tendered Josh Gordon as an exclusive rights free agent, and now they have Josh Gordon. There's talks they could sign Terrell Pryor. They have Corey Coleman still. They bring in Jarvis Landry. Their receiving core is going to be phenomenal for whoever they draft, and it will be phenomenal for Tyrod Taylor as he kind of holds that position this year. They also signed T.J. Carey. They went out and they signed a bunch of people, and they released a lot of people that were not going to be on the team. John Dorsey has a plan. So Cleveland fans, get ready. This could be the regime that fixes this. Now, Hugh Jackson, it's another story. He had a very, very down year. Obviously, when you don't win a game in an entire season, you win 1 in 2 seasons, and you still have your job, you know ownership has faith in you. And there were a lot of games this year that he ended up losing down the stretch of the game that were very head-scratching decisions and things of that nature. We'll see if Dorsey keeps him around post-season after this. But I will have a diehard Browns fan on here to discuss all these moves soon enough. So let's move on to the Bengals, who we just touched upon acquiring Cordy Glenn. You know Andy Dalton's happy about that. The Cedric Ogbuehi, Jake Fisher experiment did not work. They didn't develop into the tackles that the Bengals brass expected them to. But when the Bucs cut Chris Baker, they bring him in on a 1-year contract, and they also signed Preston Brown to a 1-year contract, which is good because Vontaze Burfict, there's rumors that he's suspended. There's rumors that he's being traded to Oakland. There's a lot of rumors going around about him, so you need depth at the linebacker position. Moving on to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who traditionally are not a team that goes out in free agency and makes a lot of moves. And they didn't. They released Mike Mitchell. They released William Gay. Those things kind of saw it coming. Re-signed Fitzgerald Toussaint, signed Chris Boswell to a 1-year contract, re-signing him, and then gave the franchise tag to Le'Veon Bell. Outside of these things, They haven't done anything, and that's not really the Steeler way. They don't usually go out and make the big splash in free agency. It's not their way of doing things. But a team that has made some splashes in the offseason so far is the Baltimore Ravens. Now, the Baltimore Ravens, the main splash I'm talking about, we could sit here, we could talk, they signed John Brown to a small deal. They released Jeremy Maclin. They released Ladarius Webb, some names that have been around the team for quite some time. Danny Woodhead, that experiment did not work out. They declined the option on Austin Howard. But the guy I got to talk about is Ryan Grant. So Ryan Grant is a player for the Washington Redskins last year. He never really started, but he was on the team. A lot of people thought he was a coach's pet. The Baltimore Ravens extend a 4-year, $29 million deal with about $15 million guaranteed to this player who has done relatively nothing in the NFL as it pertains to stats. And draft Twitter, Redskins Twitter in general blew up mocking this move and mocking Ozzie Newsome. And then Michael Crabtree gets released from the Oakland Raiders. The Oakland Raiders release Crabtree, and then the Ravens say to themselves, this ankle doesn't really look too right for Ryan Grant. And Ryan Grant, that contract and all that guaranteed money, something that he's never going to get from any other team, something that was mocked universally, gets declined and voided because of a failed physical. And now Ryan Grant is a free agent again. I feel so bad for this kid, man, because that kid thought he was getting all of this, and his agent and everything said, hey, if we were playing right now football, he'd be able to play. So it's just one of those shady things that right when Michael Crabtree gets released, Ryan Grant's ankle comes down with something after it's been mocked like crazy. Absolutely ridiculous, and it really leads me to an absolute circus. That's unfortunate for Ryan Grant. Shouldn't have been getting that kind of deal. Anyways, even with the cap just going up every year, Ryan Grant has not proven that he's that kind of receiver, and Baltimore hasn't proven the fact that they can bring receivers in that are going to, last there. I mean, that entire receiving core has been kind of an albatross for a while since Steve Smith has left. I mean, Brashad Perriman just did not work out whatsoever. And now they bring in John Brown. Hopefully he can be that speedy deep threat that Joe Flacco can throw the ball far to and get him some tutties, because they need it over there in Baltimore, especially after that devastating loss that they suffered. Let's move on to the South. And we got to start with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, Tom Coughlin, have just been laughing at the New York Giants. They're like, oh, New York Giants, you're a done deal on Andrew Norwell? How about nah? They go out and they sign Andrew Norwell, and they were literally a guard away from being an elite offensive line behind Blake Bortles and a running game that features Leonard Fournette. They go out and they get this guard in Andrew Norwell, and that offensive line is now virtually solidified. They also bring in a bunch of little ancillary pieces like Dante Moncrief, 1-year contract. It's kind of a prove-it deal. He's been lost in Indy with no Andrew Luck. He's had a lot of touchdown success with Andrew Luck when he is healthy. Bring in DJ Hayden to replace Aaron Colvin, who goes over to the Texans. Now, DJ Hayden, not as good as Colvin in the slot, but you're going to have a lot of talented players around you with A.J. Bouye and Jalen Ramsey. So then they're like, oh, the Jets like Austin Seferian-Jenkins. I'm going to go and snap him up. So they bring in Austin Seferian-Jenkins. And that's going to pair very well with Blake Bortles and that offense and the kind of short passing game that they like to utilize. Get Blake Bortles on the move, play action, hit someone like Austin Seferian-Jenkins who can make a play much better than somebody like Mercedes Lewis or Michael Rivera could have. So that's what Jacksonville has been up to. They also signed Niles Paul, who is another move tight end from Washington who has dealt with injuries, but he's another good athlete. And they're going to roll out 12 personnel or something along those lines. Those 2 tight end sets. Hit him with a play action after pounding the rock with Leonard Fournette for 3 plays straight. Hit him with a play action. Blake Bortles, give him easy throws, give him easy reads, let him manage the game. You re-signed him, gave him that 3-year contract extension that's team friendly. Let's go from there. They also brought Marquise Lee back on a 4-year contract as well. So let's move on to those Houston Texans that we just previously mentioned. They released Brian Cushing, long time. He's a Jersey kid. He will no longer be on the Houston Texans. And then they go out and they bring in Aaron Colvin. Now, these teams have just been swapping cornerbacks, it seems like. The Jaguars steal A.J. Bouye from Houston. Now, Houston goes and they steal Aaron Colvin from Jacksonville. All's well and good, right? Signed Senio Clemente, who was an offensive lineman with a 3-year deal. And then Bruce Ellington, they signed to a 1-year contract as well. The Texans are looking to bounce back. Hopefully, Deshaun Watson comes back healthy. As for the Clemente deal, it was 3 years, $12 million, and the Colvin deal was 4 years, $34 million. They also re-signed Jonathan Joseph to a 2-year, $10 million deal and bring in special team ace cornerback Jonathan Batamosi from the Patriots on a 2-year, $6.25 million deal. Let us move on quickly to the Colts and Chris Ballard. Now, the Colts have been somewhat interesting, to say the least, because they have not been active despite the fact that they are second in cap space right now. But the Indianapolis Colts, Ryan Grigson has put this team in a very, very precarious state, and he gets fired. They bring in Chris Ballard, and Chris Ballard is a very smart football mind. With all that being said, they haven't really gone out and done much. They signed Danico Autry to a 3-year contract worth $17.8 million, somebody to help pair with Jonathan Hankins, who used to be on the Giants, who's a very good, big defensive tackle. But their linebackers, their secondary, their offensive line, it's beat up. And then you're expecting Andrew Luck to come back from the shoulder injury. It does not look good for the Colts, but the Colts are in position to get king's ransom in this draft if they trade back with someone like the Bills or someone else like the Cardinals or whomever. And then you could really start replenishing the talent that is just not there on this team, because that's just the way it's been. And Andrew Luck has his career been wasted here due to poor drafting and poor decisions over the past 5 years. Chris Ballard's going to fix that. He has a bright mind, and that will be rectified, as they will say. So let's move on to the Tennessee Titans. And the Tennessee Titans go out and they steal a couple ex-Patriots. Dion Lewis, 4 years, $20 million, and that Derrick Henry hype train of being the number one back all to himself has ended, because Dion Lewis is coming to town. Malcolm Butler, 5 years, $61 million deal to pair with Logan Ryan and Adoree Jackson in that secondary. So you look at the Tennessee Titans and you just think, okay, this is another team, made the playoffs, have a young quarterback in Marcus Mariota, and they are much more encouraging now with an offense that can hopefully maximize what Marcus Mariota can do, get him out on the run. Hopefully the kid can stay healthy. But you bring in Matt LaFleur, who's very highly regarded as the offensive coordinator under Mike Vrabel. Dean Pease, who I thought was retiring, but he didn't. He's been with Baltimore for a while, used to be with the Patriots. He was the one who was the undefeated season, their defensive coordinator at the time when the Giants knocked the Patriots off. So that team, though, that's a pretty solid coaching staff right there. We'll see what Vrabel does as a head coach. We're not 100% sure yet. But I trust Matt LaFleur. I trust Dean Pease. And you bring in a couple key pieces that can really fortify this team. And they can compete with Houston, with Jacksonville, for the top spot of the division. It looks like Jacksonville probably has the edge on the other two teams, but it wouldn't be crazy to think that those other teams could come up. They re-signed Daquan Jones, who is somebody that I wanted the Giants to target because he's just a big space-eating player who has the ability to rush the passer despite being 320 pounds, has the moves to do that. 3 years, $21 million deal for him. So the Titans were able to make some moves. Good for them. Another team that was making moves as we move on to the AFC West is the Oakland Raiders. Now, the Oakland Raiders now have John Gruden as their head coach. That's very exciting. Everyone is really intrigued to see what's going to happen. But the Oakland Raiders bring in some older players, to say the least. They signed Jordy Nelson right when he hits the free agent wire. They signed Doug Martin to a 1-year deal. Jordy Nelson, 2 years, $15 million. And then they cut Michael Crabtree, who was kind of a security blanket, somebody who was a red zone threat for Derek Carr. They bring in Derek Carrier from Washington. They signed Justin Ellis to help shore up that defensive front. But they really, Doug Martin, Jordan Nelson, some older players for the Oakland Raiders. I'm intrigued to see what their plan is. This division isn't as competitive as we thought last year. I think this upcoming season, the Chargers are going to be somebody to really fear, because if you really look at the way the Chargers lost a couple of those games under Anthony Lynn, it was all down to kicking and kicking mistakes by Young Ho Koo, a kicker who ended up getting cut. Young Ho cut. So they're going to be there. You have the Chiefs, who have been making moves, and we'll get into them in a little bit. And then Denver goes out, gets Case Keenum, a quarterback who is much better than Trevor Siemian, much better than Paxton Lynch. But Oakland's going to be a story. One of the last years in Oakland, have John Gruden there coaching. It's just really, really something to kind of talk about, one of those great talking points. But we're going to move on to the Chiefs, and the Chiefs have been busy in free agency. They bring Sammy Watkins in on a 3-year, $48 million deal. They send Marcus Peters out of town to Los Angeles. They bring in Anthony Hitchens on a 5-year, $45 million deal. Get Endell Fuller from the Redskins in the trade after they sent Alex Smith out, and we all knew they were either going to send him out or cut him. They were able to get that much for him. But bringing in Sammy Watkins is interesting, because now you have these two speedy individuals in him and Tyreek Hill. Sammy Watkins can do more than just be a deep threat, and that's kind of what he's been used as, especially in Buffalo when he was healthy. And the deal, that's one thing that's a little concerning. He's had a history of foot problems, but last year he was healthy with the Rams. Sean McVay showed that he can play in different kind of styles, used him in the red zone on quick little plays and those kind of things. And we remember how highly regarded Sammy Watkins was coming out of Clemson. Now you have the mind of Andy Reid. You have the arm strength of Pat Mahomes with Sammy Watkins, Travis Kelce, and Tyreek Hill. That makes for a pretty dominant passing game, not to mention Kareem Hunt coming out of the backfield. But now you look at the defense, and you say, oh, geez, what's going to happen? Marcus Peters was their one sure thing in the secondary, with Eric Berry dealing with all of his injuries. Now you get Kendall Fuller, he can play the slot, but who's going to play those outside corners? They have to be in the market to draft one of these corners coming up in this draft coming up, which we know they will be. But let's move on to the Denver Broncos. And the Broncos go out and they get Case Keenum, and that is a solid move. They didn't overspend for Case Keenum. Case Keenum proved that he can just lead a team. Now, I love thinking this. What if they didn't come out like a straight dud against Philly, and they win that game, they go on and they win the Super Bowl? What would Minnesota have done? How much more money would Case Keenum have made just by those changes? And I know those are drastic changes, but man, the margin of error in this game is just absolutely ridiculous when you really break it down. But Case Keenum, I think that's a solid deal for the Denver Broncos, who really needed a quarterback. I mean, Paxton Lynch is a bust, and this does not limit the Broncos whatsoever from drafting a quarterback. And we saw John Elway at the pro day of Baker Mayfield. We know he is aggressive. We know he's not afraid to fail. He's going to go off of who he feels is the best fit. And it did not work out for Paxton Lynch. Does not mean it will not work out. And Case Keenum signing definitely does not limit them from trying. 2 years, $36 million deal. He also signed Tremaine Brock to a 1 year, $4 million deal. I feel like that's an incredible value for Brock. Not that Brock is an all-pro player, but still 1 year, $4 million is something that you don't see too often these days in free agency. Todd Davis is re-signed to a 3 year, $15 million deal. The Broncos getting Case Keenum, somebody they can rely on now, and you still have Von Miller, and you still have a pretty damn good defense, despite the fact they lost Aqib Talib. They still have Chris Harris. So we're going to see how that all materializes. But let's move on to the last team there is to talk about, and that is the Los Angeles Chargers, who have been quiet. Signed Virgil Green away from the Broncos, 3 year, $8.6 million. By most accounts, they have not done much. But I like the Chargers, man, this season. Again, we talked about it before, how they could have made the playoffs easily if their kicker was just a little bit more reliable. They put themselves in the positions to win, just did not materialize. And that's unfortunate. And I'm sure a lot of Chargers fans were saying this.
This is such a crock of shit.
And Al Pacino and the Chargers fans are right. It really was. But that's the nature of football. You need to be good in all three phases of offense, defense, and special teams. And they were not. Man, that must have been some awkward rides home, though. I'll tell you that much. But the draft is upon us, guys, and I just wanted to briefly go through this, and we're not even done with free agency whatsoever. There's still some top free agents left right now. Like we discussed, Justin Pugh is still available. Ndamukong Suh is still available. Terrell Pryor is still available, as well as players like Eric Ebron, Sheldon Richardson. So we're going to probably be hearing in the next couple of days where these guys will end up going. Tyrann Mathieu is another one who was released from the Cardinals like we discussed. So I'm excited. I'm sure you're excited. This past week has been incredibly exciting. And now we have the draft to look forward to. We're a little bit over a month away from the draft, but it will be coming. So let's move on to the fact of the day. The fact of the day is, let's set it up first. Let me not be so lazy about this. So we have all of these teams just absolutely feasting in free agency. You have the Bears going out. You have the Rams feasting in the trade market, as well as the Eagles. And all these teams are acquiring the people that they think will put them over the edge. So, in honor of feasting, let's talk a little about Joey Chestnut. The world's best competitive eaters can eat an average of one hot dog every 8.5 seconds. In 2016, Joey Chestnut ate a record 70 hot dogs in just 10 minutes, cementing his place at the top of the competitive eating world. So as these teams continue to feast and add talent to their rosters, just remember Joey Chestnut and his ability to gobble up them wieners. Alrighty, guys, you have a great one. Thank you so much for tuning in to Breaking the Plane. I am Nicholas Falato here, just talking some jargon about the sport we love, which is football, the National Football League. We'll see what happens with the rest of these free agents, and I'm sure we'll talk about them at some point. For me, we're Inside the Pylon. You guys have a lovely, lovely